Hello, and welcome to another NABBW Financial Podcast. Tonight, I'm with regular guest Pam Sams to discuss our very important January topic, her 10 ways to start 2022 financially fresh. January brings us a logical opportunity to sweep away any financial cobwebs and make a fresh start, beginning with the new year. And the best time to start, I think, is when our actions will have the opportunity to impact an entire year. So January is perfect for this discussion, in my opinion. And in fact, as Pam will no doubt tell us, just as we know that when we go on one of those infamous post-New Year's weight loss diets, one of the best ways to succeed is to set a goal and then keep track of our daily calorie intake by keeping a food diary, which I find very boring, but it's very effective, so that we can learn where we can make changes, even small ones, in our eating habits, because experience shows that this sort of diligence will reveal ways we may have been sabotaging ourselves. And once we know where our dietary landmines lie, we can successfully avoid them. Logic says the same is true of our finances. If we can identify exactly where all our money goes, then even making small changes in our spending habits can help free up money to bolster an emergency fund, save for retirement, or pay off debt, all of which are goals that we've talked about in other calls and all of which are very important goals. So Pam, you are very timely in suggesting tonight's topic and in bringing us your list of 10 important items to consider as part of our new financial year, new financial you plans. So thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you.
But I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself, audience. Before we dive into Pam's checklist, let me introduce this call. I'm Ann Holmes, your moderator and the boomer-in-chief of the National Association of Baby Boomer Women, an organization dedicated to educating and empowering women at midlife and beyond. And with me to help us make the best possible year-end financial decisions is Pamela J. Sams, BFA, CRPC, MBA, and trusted advisor to professional women. Pam is a chartered retirement planning counselor and NABBW's retirement planning associate. An expert in personal finance, Pam is president of Jackson Sams Wealth Strategies in Herndon, Virginia, and a monthly guest who covers important information related to money and financial planning. Welcome everyone to our first Zoom call of 2022. We're glad you joined us for this important and informative call. Now, before we can launch into tonight's discussion, I need to play a quick audio clip just to keep us legal.
Securities offered through Securities America Incorporated, a registered broker-dealer, member FINRA SIPC. Advisory services offered through Securities America Advisors Incorporated, a SEC registered investment advisory firm. Pamela Sams, investment advisor representative. Jackson Sams Wealth Strategies, Securities America Incorporated, and all other entities named are separate entities.
Thank you for having me once again, Ann, and Happy New Year to you. Even though January is almost over, I can't believe it. It's almost February next week. This month has seemed to fly by, but I wanted to definitely get a chance to do a call about some of the things that people work on during this time of the year, which is, like you said, diets, number one. Number two is generally finances after that. So I do appreciate the opportunity and come share once again some of these tips.
Well, they're excellent tips, beginning with track spending, kind of like keeping track of your calories. So you're talking about developing our budget, cutting unnecessary expenses, and using the 50-30-20 rule. So
exactly. It wouldn't be a call if I didn't talk about a budget.
Right,
So
yes.
I think almost every call that I always touch on has to do with tracking expenses and the budget. Because that's basically kind of the foundation of your financial life. If you don't know what's coming into your household and what's going out in terms of your expenses, you're kind of at a loss. You know, you're on a journey without a map, so to speak. So really tracking your expenses is the first step that you need to do for, to get a fresh start. If you didn't have done it before, I know a lot of people dread what I call the dreaded B word, which is the budget, because most people think it's more of a restricting buying, and nobody wants to ever have that in their financial life. But it's more of a financial roadmap, like I said, or setting parameters. So, you can definitely curve it to where you need to, but the key is trying to track your expenses so you know where
Mhm.
things are going. And this is ever so important as you start moving closer and closer towards retirement, because once you retire, you're in charge of developing your own paycheck from the various sources that you've accumulated over the years. So it's not going to be every 2 weeks you get a biweekly paycheck. So you're going to be devising that. And so understanding where money is going on a month to month basis is ever so important. So really tracking your expenses. The 50, 30, 20 rule. Most people have kind of heard of it. It's been popularized by Elizabeth Warren and her daughter Amelia Warren. They came up with, we had this thing a few years back, really looking at about 50% of your budget going towards your needs, which are basically your if you would think up in your Maslow's hierarchy of needs, you
Mhm.
need food, shelter, clothing, all of that. That would be 50% of your budget. 30% goes to the wants. Those are the extra things in your life, hobbies, travel, um, cable, all of those, even though a
Mhm.
lot of people think they're necessary, but they are the wants column. And then
Right.
about 20% of that would go to your financial goals. So if you look at it in essence, that 50, 30, 20, that's how you need to craft your budget and understand that doing a T chart to say, okay, what are my needs, what are my wants, and then of course saving towards your financial goals, and then that's how you would track your expenses, and then categorizing those into each of those particular units, needs
Mhm.
and or wants, and then what is set aside for financial goals. But like I said, the foundation of understanding um, your spending habits is really tracking your expenses to, and then developing, if you don't like what you see, if you're
Mhm.
overspending and you are either breaking even or falling behind, that's when you know, you look at, am I following a 50, 30, 20, where I could be overbalanced and spending a lot more into that discretionary column, which are the wants. Then you need to make some decisions there. Do
Mhm.
I eliminate or reduce certain things that I don't actually need in my budget? And that way you may be able to free up a little bit of cash flow so you can allocate towards your financial goals, and then you come out a lot more ahead versus either breaking even or behind.
All right. Well, you mentioned financial goals, and that's uh, point number 2 on your list is set financial goals. So I'm aware that too many of us flounder through life without financial goals.
Yeah.
And sometimes it seems like that's working out all right, but over time it really doesn't.
Yeah, and that's the same thing with your expenditures. If you don't know where you're going, or same thing with your budget. I mean, if you don't know where you're going, you're not going to really get there. So setting
Mhm.
your financial goals, even I know the big ones that most people have, of course, is retirement. That's usually what people think of first, but it can be any of the goals that you want to work on or you want to achieve. So with my clients, I usually either at the end of the previous year or the beginning of the year, talk about what do you want for 2022? What financial goals? Maybe it's setting aside money for a down payment for a new home. Maybe it's setting aside that college fund for your kids and or grandkids. It could be home improvement projects. Now I need to fix the fence or put a new deck on or whatever the case may be. But you need to put those financial goals in place, and then what do you need to do in order to get there? So if you
Mhm.
need to, save an additional 10,000 to put in a new fence or a deck, how are you going to fund it? Well, how much you need, number one, how are you going to fund it, and then where are you going to get the resources from? Are you going to finance it? Are you going to pay for it out of savings? Are you going to chunk it out one paycheck at a time? So it setting those financial goals and putting some order to it helps you achieve it a lot more. It's just like any other goal, just like, you've probably heard of the SMART goals, making sure it's specific, measurable,
Mhm.
actionable, realistic, and then time bound.
Mhm.
The same thing you would do with your financial goals. So especially like I said, for retirement may be another 10, 15, 20 years away, but knowing what that end game is and then working towards that. What do I need 20 years from now to retire, and what do I need to do now in present day in order to get to the future value of that number. Same thing
Mhm.
with all of the financial goals that you set for yourself. So you know how to track it appropriately and then know how to monitor it and see, track your progress. And if you're falling behind, what do you need to do in order to catch up? But setting them at first is really
Mhm.
the key to understanding how you would break those goals down into little bite-sized pieces.
All right. Point number 3, create a money calendar.
Yeah. Create a money calendar is interesting because what you need to do here is really focus in on um, certain times of the year where you need to pay certain things and then keeping track of it. So that's what you do. So you can stay on top of your finances, or really looking at specific money moves that you need to make throughout the year. So in a 12-month year, there are certain things you need to do in January. There's certain things you need to do in February. And so setting aside certain a calendar to keep track of that. We all know the kind of the big ones, April 15th for April. Maybe if you're a self-employed business owner, you have to pay quarterly taxes. So there's the 15th of every quarter that you need to put money into that. Perhaps it's I need to, to get my car inspected, or I need to, buy something. You would put it on this money calendar so you can keep track of those money moves and keeps it running a little bit more smoothly for you. Same thing with, we always talk about towards the end of the year with rebalancing your portfolio. That would go on a money calendar. So maybe November, December, you take a look at where your portfolio has been for the year and you do an allocation or rebalance or allocation. But
Mhm.
making sure you put those financial tasks separately from those day-to-day tasks really makes it easier to organize. And perhaps you want to set up a separate calendar, maybe a physical calendar, because I know a lot of people like tangible things, but it could be electronic calendar. It can be a Google
Mhm.
calendar where you kind of multi-code it with those financial tasks that you need to versus the day-to-day tasks, so you don't get things confused. So maybe a red item or a green item. Green's
Mhm.
good for money, so maybe
Mhm.
color coded green, and that would be your basically your money or financial calendar that you would take take throughout the year for that.
Mhm.
And there's tons of resources online about how to create a money calendar accordingly. And then they have also certain tasks that need to be done certain times of the year. So you can always Google financial calendar or money calendar, and then they'll show you kind of those big building blocks that you need to put in on each of those. And then you have your own specific ones that you need to adhere to as well. So you have maybe you have your kids in private school and the tuition needs to be paid every couple of months or every 3 months, or
Mhm.
the bigger ones. So you would split that out how you want to pay it as well. So it could be specific, but it can also be measured in the ones that are traditionally put in place, like the April 15th or the quarterly payments or the rebalancing and things like that.
All right. Excellent. And point number 4, check your credit score.
Credit score. Yes, what you want to do here, especially, I'm sure a lot of people are using credit cards
Right.
during the holidays, and those credit card bills are starting to show up in your inbox or your mailbox. So you want to look at of course, your use of credit, what happened, of course, over the course of the last 2 months or 3 months that you may have been using credit, see what the balances are. And then, as just as important of checking your credit score, it's checking your credit utilization as well. So if you've run up a little bit, unfortunately, because of holidays and things like that, see where you are with how much credit you have extended to you, but then how much you have as a balance. And hopefully it's under 30%. That's where you want to keep your credit utilization, is under 30%. Other than that, it starts to eat into your credit score. So if you're
Mhm.
using more than 30% of credit, that actually lowers your credit score. So if you have your balances from the credit cards, look at your total amount of credit that's outstanding, and then how much as a percentage balance that you have to see where you are. If
Okay.
you are over 30%, you may want to start working on how to reduce that to limit to really manipulate your credit score a little bit more. But this would be the time to check that, and then of course your credit score. A lot of fraud has been going on lately, especially during the holidays and towards the beginning of the year. And there's a lot of scams that are out there as well. So this would be a perfect time to see what your credit score, what's on your credit report. So
Mhm.
checking your credit report, checking your credit score. You have access to your credit report, not your score, but your credit report annually, at least one copy from all three credit bureaus a year. It's called annualcreditreport.com, not free credit report. They kind of put you into some program to try to get you to pay for it. So you have access to a complimentary one every year, at least once a year. So you can
Mhm.
pull it towards the beginning of the year, or you can pull it towards the last part of the year. I usually say somewhere in the beginning, so give you a fresh start to kind of see where things are. But you get it through from TransUnion, Equifax, and Experian. Those are the
Mhm.
three credit bureaus. And they don't necessarily match sometimes. So if there are some things on your credit report that's not represented on those each of those credit bureaus say something should have fallen off or should not be there. You always want to dispute those through the credit bureau that it belongs to. So if it's something popping up on one of the credit reports that's not represented on the others, and you don't think it should be there, you want to contact that particular credit bureau to dispute that so it can come off.
Mhm.
The scores, unfortunately, you do have to pay for. There's a what they call a Vantage 3 score, which is all three as a composite. From that, you do have to pay for it, or you can go individually to each of those credit bureaus to get your individual score from each one of those. But this would be the time to get a copy of the free copy of your credit report, check your credit utilization, since if you may have been overspending a little bit more on gifts and things like that towards the holiday, make sure it's under 30%. If it's not, work towards that so you
Mhm.
can, like I said, really get your credit score down. I mean, I'm sorry, credit score up,
Mhm.
so you're not getting dinged for being over 30%. So checking your credit report, checking your credit score, and then also checking your credit utilization is where you want to focus in on that with credit.
All right, just an aside on that, I've noticed more and more, it seems like there's commercials where they talk about this place, you can do something and it won't impact your credit score. So
Yeah.
is that reliable? I've never understood if that would really be reliable or
Yeah,
not.
exactly. Depending on it is what they call a soft inquiry. So
Mhm.
it's not, they'll go in and they'll see if you're kind of credit worthy. So it's kind of like a light inquiry. And so that really doesn't affect it as much, your credit score. So that's generally what those are. If you go to actually apply for credit, so let's say they do um, the light or the soft inquiry, and then you actually go to fill out an application for that, that becomes a hard inquiry, and
Mhm.
then that does go on your credit
Okay.
report as a hard inquiry. And you don't want too many of those in a short period of time as well, because that also lowers your credit score, because that looks like you're out trying to get as much credit as possible. So you be selective with that. So for example, if you go and you try to get a auto loan, for the most part, you could go to the dealership and they'll run it, and then they'll kind of look through a variety of different banks to fund you. So that may just count as one versus you going individually to those dealerships and each one of those running a hard inquiry on it. You don't want to
Okay.
do that. So you want to look at how they do it. Ask first before you have it do it. Is this a hard inquiry, and how many lenders are you looking at? And then generally, if each of those lenders get a copy of your credit report from that one inquiry, it'll drop off generally after about 7 to 10 days after that. But it's just that one hard inquiry versus several for those each
Mhm.
individual lenders.
All right. Point number 5 is very important. I have to confess that in my younger days, I did not do this. But point number 5, save money for emergencies.
Yeah, I know young people don't do it. It's a day to day. I need to live for today and I need to pay my bills and how I'm ever going to save for put money into savings. But it's ever so important because that kind of leads back to point number the one we just talked about, credit. If you don't
Mhm.
have access to having a an emergency fund or rainy day fund or whatever you want to call it, then you would be relying on credit, and then you don't want to have to rely on credit every time an emergency pops up, because then we're back into over the 20-30% credit utilization.
Mhm.
So putting a emergency fund, or like I said, rainy day fund in place would be beneficial for you. Rule of thumb is about 3 to 6 months worth of living expenses in a emergency fund, something liquid, something you can get to right away. Uh, Most of the time, people are like, that's a large amount of money. I'm not going to ever be able to save that amount. And I always say, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. So even
Mhm.
if you start small, you put away a little bit out of each paycheck, paying yourself first becomes a little bit more disciplined to put money away for savings. So you're looking at even if it's as low as $5, $10 out of each paycheck, as long as you're building up and developing that savings habit
Mhm.
to develop the cash reserve, and then work your way up. Maybe it's 1 month worth of living expenses, and then you work
Mhm.
your way up to 2 and 3, and on and so forth. But it gives you into a habit of saving for emergencies, so you're not relying on the credit cards. That's where you really want to stay away from. If something pops up and you go immediately to using plastic, that can get you into trouble. So try to
Mhm.
focus on saving money for emergencies. I know there's a lot of things out there. There's what they call a 52-week challenge. Sometimes that happens at the beginning of each year, since we have 52 weeks in the year, is to put away a little bit each week and then build that up and then keep building it up and keep building it up. Hopefully by the end of the year, you have maybe, a couple of thousand
Mhm.
that's saved up into an emergency fund, and you keep doing that and you keep doing it. The key is trying not to tap into your emergency fund
Mhm.
when you don't have to. So, something pops up and you go, oh, I have to pay a bill. I need to dip into that. Try not to if you can. I know things happen, but the key is trying to be disciplined with the savings program.
All right. Yes, I've heard many different suggestions. Some people have said, every day they take the change out of their wallet
Hmm.
and
Yeah.
and save that, and
Hmm.
and I can see how that could work for some people, but uh, working from home as I do,
Yeah.
um, I don't I don't spend very much on a daily basis for things like coffee or something like that. So
Hmm.
that kind of a plan sounds like a thing that would work for a person that's working out of the home and going and
Hmm.
buying coffee and things like that during the day. But I think everybody has to come up with their own plan as to how they can do it.
Yeah, and 'cause a lot of times people are, I have a couple of clients that like using cash. So it's a kind of a cash diet type of
Hmm.
thing. So people use cash a lot differently than they do plastic. So
Hmm.
if you're able to, for example, if you go to an ATM and you take out $50, maybe you use some for expenses, but you save the other 20 or something and you put it into a cookie jar, you kind of old
Hmm.
fashioned cookie jar, or
Right.
some type of a vase or something throughout the year, and just kind of keep sticking money in there. That builds up as well. So
Hmm.
everybody has to find their own method on what works, or even if it's um, putting it into an account that they don't see. I have a lot of clients that start a separate, let's say, online banking, and then they just have it something out of their paycheck or their checking account from the regular, and it goes straight to the other account. If you don't see it, you're not
Hmm.
tempted, and it just grows on the side. So everybody's going to have their own method to doing so, but the key is really to have a way to do the emergency, save money for emergencies.
Yes, my dad always used to say, pay yourself first. As soon as you get your paycheck, pull the money aside that is your savings. And I always used to say, but Dad, I mean, when I was a young mom, I would say, a young divorced mom, I would say, there is so much stuff that I have to pay with that
Yeah,
check. But
exactly. There's so much. I need that $50 that I can
right.
be paying a bill with it
Mhm.
instead of putting it into savings. But it's, I think it's telling yourself how important you are as a thinking to count yourself as a bill,
Mhm.
let's say. So you
Right.
put yourself first and you put away the $50 or how much you can afford for that, and then everybody else gets paid out of that.
Well, I have gone with that other plan that you mentioned, which is the separate account.
Mhm.
That works for me. So
Yes, I do the same thing as well. So I have a couple of different accounts where things go, and
mhm.
then they build up on the side, and then I don't see it, and I don't
Right.
have to be tempted to use it or anything. And I
Mhm.
know it's growing there for the emergencies that I need it
Right.
for.
Exactly. Okay, it looks like we're at point number 6, get tax advice.
Yes, tax advice or tax planning is a 12-month venture. It's not just
Okay.
April 15th. You will want to start getting tax advice a little bit earlier, especially as you start collecting your W-2s and getting things prepared for filing. I know a lot of people that actually they just opened it up, I believe, on the 24th that you can start
Mhm.
filing your 2021 tax returns, and you should be getting most of your W-2s by the end of January. So probably
Right.
by the end of next week, you can start doing that. But you need to start looking at and getting tax advice a little bit earlier if you're going to file, number one, early. And then also, if you end up in an owing situation, are there things that you can be doing differently? You want to know that sooner rather than later,
Mhm.
not later in the year, because then you end up in the same position at the beginning of next year if you don't get the ongoing tax advice, especially for people who had increase in income or bonuses, things like that will maybe put you up into a different tax bracket and you may not be aware of it. So you want to get the tax advice early so you can adjust maybe your W-4.
Mhm.
You can go to your employer, fill out the W-4 worksheet, or you can go to the IRS website and do what they call the W-4 withholdings calculator. It'll ask you some questions, maybe do a little pro forma on your tax return on what happened last year, or let's say 2020, what your tax return looked like and what the deductions are that they've taken out. They will spit out and tell you how much you need to have for exemptions on your paycheck, so you can go back to HR and say, okay, instead of two, maybe I need to be doing something a little bit different for that. And so that's kind of that ongoing tax. I have friends that are tax accountants, so they always recommend trying to go and look at the W-4 calculator at the beginning of the year, mid-year, and then probably towards the end, so you can make those adjustments and course correct a little bit earlier than waiting. Because then if you wait until October or November and you really should have had more withheld from your check, then you're playing catch up and you have to have large chunks taken out of your check and you need that for your expenses.
Mhm.
So doing it periodically throughout the year, getting that tax advice and running it accordingly, it gives you a chance to make those course corrections a little bit earlier, sooner rather than later.
Mhm. Point number 7 on your list is plan for retirement. And I have to tell you that on Facebook today, one of my high school friends was having a birthday. He turned 70 and
Mhm.
he wrote a big, long discussion about turning 70
Mhm.
on Facebook today, which was very well written. But one of the things
Mhm.
he said is, he never realized that retirement was really ever going to come along, because when he was a young man, it seems so far away. And
Mhm.
now he was saying, how can it be that God has allowed me to live to be 70? And I thought that number one, it was interesting to say that God had allowed him to, because I'd never really thought of it that way.
Yeah.
But it was concepting as well. That's not the word I meant, but it was an interesting concept that he was talking about how when we're young, we don't really see retirement as being something that is close enough that we need to plan for it. So
Yeah, yeah, and that's the key. I had a conversation with one of my young clients that just became a client last month, and she's 30 or 31, and so like you said, that looks like that's far away if we're talking
Mhm.
about a 65 as kind of the traditional retirement. So that's basically 35 years away, and so
Mhm.
sometimes it's hard. And when I do planning, I have to kind of, in just like what your friend said, if you're young, you have to imagine your future self. And when you
Mhm.
do planning, so your 31-year-old self is different than when your 65-year-old self.
Mhm.
So hopefully, when you get to 65 or when you get to the retirement age, you're going to thank that 31-year-old for
Mhm.
saving and planning for a
Right.
proper retirement. So that's the disconnect, and especially as a behavioral financial advisor going through a lot of the studies, is that it's hard to mentally for us to picture our future selves. And that's why sometimes people don't plan accordingly for retirement until it's too late, because then they go, oh, now retirement is a little bit closer. It's
Mhm.
10 years away versus 35 years away. And now I can start to see my future self a little bit more. And so we don't want to be in that position. The earlier you get started, the better. That's why I always recommend for young people who, when they start their first job, if they can put as much as they can into their 401k, they're young, they can put money away. That money, compound interest, or Albert
Mhm.
Einstein said, is the seventh or the eighth wonder of the world, is that compounding interest will grow over time. And so the same thing, just like your emergency fund, if you put away a percentage of your salary and it goes into your retirement plan, you don't see it, you don't miss it, it's out of your paycheck, it's growing for you in that account that you don't see on a regular
Mhm.
basis. I mean, you get the statements and things, but
Right.
if it comes out of your paycheck and that's what you get to work with, then that's what you get to work with. But the percentage that's going into your retirement account grows over that, basically that 20 to 30-year period. And then you're going to thank your 31-year-old self when you get
Mhm.
65 that you did that a little bit earlier than playing catch up. But that's the key, is looking and planning for retirement at the beginning of each year. They always say at the beginning of the year, you're a fresh start. You're looking at where you are with retirement. So if retirement is 10, 15, 20 years away, where are you in that process? If it's 10 years away, you need to be at a certain point in order to retire at 65. If you're not, what do you need to do in order to catch up? Maybe if you're over 50, there's what they call a catch up provision in the rules, where the
Mhm.
maximum is 20,000. This year is 20,500. You can put an extra 6,500 away if you're over 50 in what they call a catch-up contribution. So if you're maxing out and you're not taking advantage of that, that's extra money that you can put into your retirement account in order to catch yourself up. That's why they call it catch up,
Mhm.
to get you on track for retirement. Or if you're not where you think you need to be 10 years from now or 15 or wherever, how do I get, do I retire later? Do you delay retirement? How
Mhm.
much am I going to get for Social Security? How much am I going to get for pension if a pension is available? So all of these, this, I always say, it's not your grandfather's or your grandmother's retirement anymore. There's so many moving parts, so many levers that are
Mhm.
involved with planning for retirement. And back in the day when our parents retired and they had a pension. Most of them
Mhm.
had a pension. They worked at the job for 25, 30 years. They got a really nice either gold watch or something nice, a pen or something, and then they got a
Mhm.
nice pension and they were at home living comfortably for the
Mhm.
most part.
Right.
Now it's all about defined contribution plans, which are plans that put the onus on the employee to save enough for retirement in a 401k or 403b or
Mhm.
TSP for government workers. So if you're not doing that, the employer is matching perhaps, but if you're not putting in enough, then you're behind the curve
Mhm.
versus back in the day when our parents had their jobs, they had pensions, and they were pretty much set for with having a lifetime income. You would have to do the same thing for yourself when you're planning for retirement is once you build up the 401k or your retirement employer sponsored retirement plans, like I was mentioning before, you're going to be in charge of your own paycheck. So how do you withdraw money out efficiently? When do you need to draw it out? And is it going to sustain yourself over the lifetime, over your lifetime? So that's the whole piece of retirement planning is gauging where you are at the beginning of each year, reviewing what happened the year before, what's the balances of my retirement plans? Am I
Mhm.
putting in enough? Is it going to be enough for my future self when I do retire? And if not, what do I need to do now to course correct, put money in, maybe perhaps retire a little bit later, maybe get more money, more out of rates of return out of your investment. I know that's a little slighted this week, especially because things have been a little bit fluctuating.
Mhm.
But that's where you want to look at to see what the effects of a market downturn would have on your overall portfolio as well. So you want to monitor that to continue. If you retired, let's say this year and the market continues to be volatile, this may not be the year you want to retire because if you retire in a down market, that's kind of hard to make up the parts of your portfolio to live a
Mhm.
lifetime or provide a lifetime income. So you may want to reevaluate, but this is where you do when you start planning for your overall retirement. Look at all of the variables that are involved as well.
What you're talking about also caused another thought to come to my brain, Pam, and that is, do you think that the, for so long, as long as I can remember, retirement was 65, but
Mhm.
Social Security has changed
Yeah,
over the years, and depending on what year you were born, now Social Security starts paying out for people past 65 in
hmm,
many, many cases.
correct.
So do you think that we will come to a point, especially because you and I have discussed in the past about how if you retire at 65, you might need to plan for 4 decades or at least 3 decades
Yeah.
of life after retirement. So do you think that as human beings are living longer, that we will eventually change when retirement officially
Mhm.
considered to start?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be an adjustment. For the most part, retirement for most people now is probably 66, and then it goes like 66 in 2 months and 4 months. And
Mhm.
for the most part, people born after a certain year, it's 67. But Congress has been talking about increasing the retirement age for Social Security. The delayed credits put you at age 70, but that needle may be moving in
Mhm.
terms of what they call a traditional retirement. And if you think back about the, and I've done of course, through the course of my career, a lot of research and a lot of reading on it. Retirement wasn't really ever a thing for older, it just became a fairly new concept, let's say
Mhm.
within like the 1940s or 50s. Before,
Right.
most people just kind of worked and worked until they
Till,
died.
till they died, right?
Yeah, until they died. And so it wasn't ever really thought about. And so
Mhm.
when it became more of the norm, that's when they kind of put in, okay, looking at longevity tables or actuarial tables on when people were retired. That's kind of where they put Social Security at generally 65. Statistically, they say, okay, you're only going to live probably maybe another 3 or 4 years. And then we have a pool of money and we can just pay out, and then we
Mhm.
put that back into it because
Right.
you passed away. So they arbitrarily kind of put a number in there based on the actuarial calculations of how long many people would live, how long they would collect retirement, Social Security benefits, and then that's kind of how they gauge the 65. But before, like I said, it really wasn't a whole big thing. Most people just kind of worked and worked and worked, and then they died.
Mhm.
But I'm sure that has been, as longevity has become longer, people have been living longer and longer. I think the last thing I read is that babies born now could have a longevity of about 120, 125. So people are going to be living longer.
Mhm.
So I'm sure that number is going to move out at some point.
Okay. I just wanted your opinion on it because it
Mhm.
just seemed to me that it was the direction that we were going. So,
Yes.
okay, getting back onto target here with our questions.
Mhm.
Question number, point number 8 on your list is pay off debt.
Yes, back to kind of the credit situation or credit conversation, is that now we have probably had increased spending towards the holidays. You want to look at how you would pay down or pay off your credit cards and devising a strategy in order to do so. A couple of different ways. I think I've probably shared them before. A debt snowball where you're paying
Mhm.
off the smallest to the largest, and then this debt avalanche, which is reverse. Basically, you look at the highest interest rate cards down to the lowest interest rate cards. But however you devise which strategy you want to use, putting something in place a little bit earlier in the year to determine how long you're going to be paying down or paying off your debt. That's where the goal is, hopefully, to pay off your debt. You don't even have
Mhm.
to do the big items, mostly credit card, mostly consumer debt, maybe loans. If you want to look at it on a method with the snowball, you can put all of your debts in, including your mortgage, and it'll show you how you can pay that off in the most efficient manner as well. But the focus is paying off your debt and then devising a strategy in order to do so, either through a debt snowball or through a debt avalanche. Either way, but pick a method and then
Mhm.
put something in place in order to pay off your debt efficiently.
All right. And that is really important because that debt, I've seen, credit cards where they're telling me, um, if you pay the minimum, you will have this amount paid off by whatever,
Yeah.
10 years from now or something.
Yeah,
And I'm
10
thinking,
years from now.
okay,
Yeah.
so don't pay the minimum.
Yeah, do not pay the minimum. And I have conversations with younger people, especially college age, and I was like, well, you could be paying for that pizza party for the next 20 years
Mhm.
if you don't do this right. So don't try to charge your a pizza party on a credit card and then just pay the minimum. So you
Mhm.
would, be well into your job and you're still paying. So use it wisely. I always tell people to use credit wisely and to think about the conversation we just talked about retirement. Going into retirement saddled with a lot of debt is eating up your expenses. So if you have, for example, $500 or $600 a month going towards servicing debt, that's $500 or $600 a month that you can use for extra income for your expenses.
Mhm.
So it is very imperative going into retirement that you don't have any consumer debt. It's okay to have a mortgage or maybe a car loan or something like that. But consumer debt, if you can go into retirement with as little or nothing in that, that will free up the servicing the debt portion of that. You really
Mhm.
need that for your income. You don't need to be servicing credit card debt with that extra income because, like I said, you're going to be devising your own paycheck and how you draw money out. You don't want to have to draw it out for consumer debt. It's
Mhm.
just you just don't want to be in that in that
Right.
situation.
All right. Point number 9, review risk management, and that includes insurance programs and company benefits.
Yeah, so risk managers basically your insurance programs. So you're looking at your life insurance, your homeowners, your auto, any disability. these are kind of your company benefits: disability insurance, health insurance. I'm sure, this is also the time period where you probably did open enrollment, probably sometime in October, November, December, just seeing what the effects of that is. Of course, if money, if premiums increase, you'll see that on your January paycheck. If there is a change, I think we've had this conversation before, and if there's a change in drug formulary from year to year, you'll have that nasty surprise in January when you go pick up your prescription.
Mhm.
And especially for people who are Medicare, something could have fallen off your formulary or increased premium there where it went to a tier 1 or tier 3, and then you go to the pharmacy and it's not covered anymore, or they've raised the price. So this is where you start reviewing your company benefits, Medicare programs if you're on Medicare, making sure everything is still in alignment to where it was before. They did have an increase in Part B premiums depending on where you are with your income level as well.
Mhm.
And then also your life insurance programs. Not to say you have to make any changes, but if there were adjustments in your life and your life experiences, maybe you had a baby, you got divorced, you became a widow, whatever the case may be, this would be the time to reevaluate your life insurance programs. Same thing with health insurance. You probably already have made the selection for that, but how is that operating now that you've hit January 1st? Or are you paying an increase in copay? Or are you paying an increase in premiums for meds? Or are you doing some things different with your health insurance? Disability, always go back to your company benefits. So what is disability going to pay if you're working and something happened, you became disabled? What percentage of your salary will they cover?
Mhm.
This is where you want to, just like I do a year-end thing, I always do a beginning. If you didn't do a year-end, you definitely want to make sure you understand your company benefits. And if you didn't put things into place, make a note on that money calendar that we talked
Mhm.
about on, okay, now if I want an HSA, but I didn't sign up for one, maybe I need to sign up for one during next open enrollment. Let me mark my next open enrollment date, which may be October, November, December, in order to put that in place. So that money calendar comes back into play on some
Mhm.
of these things that you need to get taken care of as well. And then this is also a time to, if you're getting a little bit older, to evaluate perhaps putting a long-term care policy in place. If you're getting older and you went through this, both you and I have been through
Mhm.
with parents and being in assisted living facilities and nursing homes, that the cost is exorbitant.
It is.
Just to let you know, the cost is exorbitant. So
Right.
if there's a way to offload that into an insurance company, putting in a long-term care policy in place, you want to start shopping around for that during the time that you're reviewing your risk management and insurance programs.
Yes. I'll just tell a little story about that. My mother and stepfather moved into a um, aging in place kind of a community,
Mhm,
maybe 10 years ago. They're both died now, and
mhm,
um, my brother was telling me that I had forgotten that when they moved into this place, they had to put down $250,000
mhm,
as a deposit and show that they had at least 3 times that much of net worth.
mhm.
Um, they thought, okay, this must be a really fine place that we're staying because this is a lot of money.
Yeah.
Um, later on, my mother was less happy about the place, but
Yep.
that's not nearly the story that I was trying to get to. My brother told me, because my mother died late this past summer, my brother,
Mhm,
who's in charge of settling everything, told me that the place where they had lived has refunded money, which we weren't thinking that we were expecting, from the deposit,
mhm.
but it's not anywhere near the amount that they
Yeah.
put in. And
Mhm.
so I don't
Of
know
course.
how these places calculate um, what they give back. Um,
Mhm.
I suppose it might have to do with how many years you stay there. I don't really have a clue how they
Yeah.
imagine.
Yeah, I'm not certain as well, but for the most part, what they do is how long you stayed there, what level of care, because a lot of some of these facilities also have
Yes,
assisted
this one
living
had,
parts of
uh,
it. Yeah,
yes.
exactly. And so how much did you actually use of those facilities, and then how long you stayed there, and then they kind of work backwards on an actuarial calculation on what they can refund back on that. But yeah, those are becoming very popular. But like you said, it does take a large outlay in the
Mhm,
beginning for it, but it's an agent in place. They have different units where you'll start as kind of the 55 plus or 60 plus
mhm.
community. And then as you start aging, adding on the memory care or the assisted living
Right.
as well. But some of those have become but like you said, they're not cheap, and having
No,
a long-term care policy in place to cover some of those costs really helps out as well.
I would say because, when I think back to the fact that they had to put in 250,000 when they joined, right now, I will be honest and say, I don't have 250,000 I could
Yeah,
fork over to a place because I wanted to go live there.
correct.
And
Yeah.
so, yeah, it's hugely expensive what these kind of
Hmm.
places are. So you are correct that
Yeah.
um, planning for as you age is something that you really need to think of in terms of. But I'm going to get off of that topic and get to your point number 10 because I'm
Hmm.
fascinated why you say assemble a financial team, and I'd love to hear who you would put on a financial, what types of experts should be on my
Yeah.
financial team.
Exactly. And I think a lot of times people do want to do it yourself. And I always tell people a lot of your financial life is not really a do it yourself project because there's
Mhm,
so many, like I said, moving parts, especially for retirement planning and taxes and all of these things. And this is what professionals do on a day-to-day basis. So having a financial advisor as kind of the quarterback on your team, having a CPA or a tax person that's there, probably a property and casualty person that will be able to handle your homeowners and your auto, and then probably having a life insurance person if your financial advisor is not licensed to do the life insurance part of
mhm,
that. So those are, and then of course the state attorney. So if you have wills and trusts and
mhm,
putting those in place, you want to revisit those on a regular basis, and having an estate attorney to review those documents, refresh them, update them as needed, as beneficiaries change, as your life change. You may want to add and subtract
mhm,
on your estate plan. So that's kind of the financial team that you want to put together. Like I said, as a financial advisor, I'm kind of the quarterback and introduced to put other people on your team for that. But those are the go-to people that will be able to give you advice in all of those different areas to make
mhm,
sure you're financially well. So the accountant handles the tax piece, and then you have the life insurance, and you have your advisor, and then you have your estate attorney, and then, like I said, probably a property and casualty to make sure that they're evaluating your auto and homeowners, because
mhm.
there's a lot of different moving parts in that. You could have increases in premium, you can have decreases in premium. You have to make sure you have enough on your deductibles. If your house value increase, is it still going to be or you still have the same coverage that will provide for you? So having a person, and not just an 800 number that you call,
Mhm.
having a designated person if you can, that will be able to take care of you, and then having all of those people uh, interact. So have, being in touch with each of those so they know how to advise you and everybody's on the same page, versus taking advice from one versus the other, keeping everybody basically in the loop.
All right. Well, that's a good list of 10 ways to start financially fresh, and I thank you for
Hmm.
assembling that list. I have one last question.
Hmm.
Uh, Going back to our November call, on the November podcast at the end, I brought up my personal concern over the huge rise that I was seeing in inflation.
Hmm.
And then, of course, in December, inflation continued. I
Yes.
read yesterday that December prices rose 7% year over year, which was the
Hmm.
sharpest jump in almost 40 years, which I think
Yes.
might take us back to Jimmy Carter, but I didn't
Hmm.
do the math on that. I could be wrong. But anyway, as of yesterday, Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell, I'm sure you know, he announced that
Mhm.
faced with mounting pressure from the rapidly rising consumer prices we've all been seeing at the grocery store, the gas station, and elsewhere. I mean, even mortgage rates are up, and the stock market, as you mentioned, is extremely volatile.
Yeah.
So the Federal Reserve has signaled that it is preparing to raise interest rates sooner and perhaps more aggressively than we had been anticipating that they would just a few months
Mhm.
ago.
Yeah.
They say that the rate adjustment will likely come in March, and Powell indicated that the central bank cannot afford to leave inflation unchecked. So his stated goal is to use the rising interest rate to help stabilize prices, which I know that it will.
Mhm. Yeah.
But I have a question here, and you may laugh at it, but since this Federal Reserve effort still won't help the current supply chain woes, it won't cure COVID, so people can
Yeah.
safely eat out and shop in person and resume the lives that we used to have. I thought it might be good to ask you this one question. Since we first discussed inflation late
Mhm.
last quarter, I was wondering if you would recommend there are things that we should do now before the inflation rates go up.
Yeah, I mean, just like I was explaining before, this is a good time to kind of see where things are with your budget. Because if things
Mhm.
are going to start to increase in prices and interest rates, you're going to want to start factoring that in, just like
Mhm.
the Fed's price in certain things in the stock market. You want to start doing the same thing with your personal economy. If you have loans that are out there, maybe this could, I know before it was a really good time to refinance, but things are creeping up a little bit, but it could be an opportunity to kind of get it in before. The last time I spoke with one of my colleagues that was a mortgage broker, she said they're creeping up, but they may possibly increase up to up over 4. So this could be an opportunity to refinance before we get into that
Mhm.
arena with the interest rates, if you were thinking about doing that. So just really looking at where you are with your personal economy, taking inventory of what your expenses are like, what your income is going to be, because now things have been slowly increasing because of the inflationary pressures that we've had, and your loans are going to cost you more with the interest rates going up.
Mhm.
So do you need to if you're in a personal loan situation or you need a personal loan, getting things done before March, before the rate hike, because then money's going to cost you more. Now it's going to be okay on the other side because now interest rates go up. It's bad when you have to borrow. It's good when you're saving money
Mhm.
because the interest rates will start to increase a little bit on savings accounts and some of those other accounts where we've seen little marginal amounts in your savings account, 0.3 or point whatever. On money market accounts, those may start to creep up a little bit there, but when you're borrowing money, things are going to cost you more there. So if you need to borrow money between now and March, you want to do it now
Mhm.
before things start to increase with interest rates.
Okay. Well, that's good to hear. And as far as, I said earlier that I have an account that I put my savings into.
Mhm.
It's been so sad for me that it wasn't making any money. So,
Yes.
so maybe now it will start.
Maybe now it would be
Right.
like I said, but it's one of those kind of balancing act. When I
Right.
borrow money, it's going to cost me. When I save money, yes, but it's a good thing when you do that. But if you have to borrow money, that's the thing about rising interest rates. But
Mhm.
it's needed because we have been running a very high in inflation with the supply chain issues and the supply and demand, and so things have been increasing. And COVID has definitely have led to a lot of what we've been experiencing. A lot of the industries that have been hurt because of it, and operating, and things are closing, and so that shrinks the overall supply as well with
Mhm.
what people need for that. So hopefully over time we'll get out of this situation that we're in.
Right.
We'll fix the supply chain, and then hopefully the rate increase will be able to stabilize the prices and the inflation a little bit more.
Well, that would be good. As far as supply chain, my daughter was telling me that a year ago she had given her husband a pair of gloves as a Christmas present, and
Mhm.
he was on a business trip and he lost one of the gloves. So she thought,
Mm.
Well, I'll just go back to the catalog store that she bought the gloves from, and I'll buy him another pair. And they were back ordered until September of 2024. She was
Oh my
going,
goodness.
she was like, what? She said, I can't, they're not even saying it would be,
Wow.
still this
Within, yeah.
season. She says it's not even the same year.
I know. And then you'll go, remember those gloves I bought you
Right.
back in 2021?
Right, yes.
They just came back in stock and it's like 3
Right.
years later.
Right, yes. I just had to share that story because when she told me about it, I was like, how do they know they're going to have them in 2024?
Yeah,
Yes.
exactly. I guess they're just putting out where it's like, okay, maybe the supply chain will be fixed by that time. So let's
Right.
just push that number out.
Right.
And we're not even going to say it's going to be within the year. We're just going to
Right.
give ourselves some wiggle room.
Right. Yes. But I was just as mystified as she was by that
That's pretty
discussion of
funny.
telling her that she could order the gloves in 2 years.
2
so-
years.
Okay. Well, enough of that. At least we had a little bit of a laugh here at the end
Yes.
after this. But as usual, Pam, it's been
Mhm.
great talking to you. You've had wonderful information that you've shared with us here tonight. And so I thank you again, as
Yes.
I do every month, for being my guest and providing us with this excellent financial checklist to get us off to a
Mhm.
great start in 2022. And I'm especially interested in your point number 10, as the assembling of a financial team. So I think that's not a thing that we've talked about as much as some of the other things like pay off debt, which
Yeah.
we talk about often because it's important. But
Mhm.
I want to tell people that are listening that I look forward to our next discussion, which, unless our schedules change, would standardly be Thursday, the 24th of February at the
Mhm.
same time and location. Pam and I are still figuring out what the topic will be, but I know it will, for you listeners, it will be as important as this one was. And so as soon as Pam and I have determined what it is, I will post it online so everybody can find out. Meanwhile, Pam, is there anything else that you'd like to say before we wrap up this call?
Nope. I mean, I think this is a good list to get people started fresh for the new year. Like I said, if we're going to reverse, putting together a team. I know a lot of times when you start a new year, you want to do things differently. One of them, like I said, after weight loss and nutrition, finances are generally the other. So this would be an opportunity to really get that financial team in place earlier in the year. So you can start off fresh and look at some of these other items that we talked about.
All right. Well, audience, thanks for joining us for this great call with Pamela Sams. If you have questions after the call, feel free to email them to Pam at pamela@jacksonsams.com or go to her newly updated website. I spent a lot of time on it in this past day, Pam.
Okay.
It's changed a lot since, and I really like it. So I'm telling everybody who's listening to be sure to go to www.jacksonsams.com. That's JACKSONSAMS.com. And while you're there, be sure to find out why Pam selected the swan as her company logo. She told us last month, I think, but in case you didn't remember, she'll tell you on the website.
Mhm.
And now, if anybody who's listening would like to know more about the National Association of Baby Boomer Women, check out our website, nabbw.com. We have a forum at Boomer Women Speak, which doesn't have anybody speaking at it because they're all on Facebook, but there's a lot of evergreen content that's there that's worth looking at. And our Facebook page is at facebook.com/NABBW. So unless there's anybody listening who has a question that we didn't give you a chance to ask, because I just kind of talked past that because trying to keep up with our time frame, but we have time here for anybody listening who might have a question for us. All right, then you can reach Pam at the way that I told you earlier if you have any questions in the future. And thanks, Pam, and thanks everyone who's listening for joining us tonight.
All right. Thank you. Good night.
All right, good night.